I'm going to get started with introductions. I'm Rob Pasick, and many of you know me, and many of you are new. So raise your hand
Yeah.
if this is the first time that you've done this. Fantastic. So welcome, Brenda. Welcome back, Bill. Bill's been a while, and I've been running Leaders Connect. I'm trying to figure this out. I think it started in about '98, so I'm almost to the 25th year. And we had some very great speakers on. I think this is second or third time Thomas has been on. One as the director of the Center for Entrepreneurship many years ago, and then he's also been on about his new role. So Thomas, thank you so much for being a supporter of what we do. And we meet every couple of weeks. We used to meet every month live, but we moved to meeting on Zoom, and it actually is working pretty good because we used to meet live at 7 a.m., which means some of you had to get up at about 5 o'clock to get here. So I think we might stick with this format for a while. And then we also had people from all over the world really who could participate. So we're gonna let me just not talk too much about myself. I'm very quickly. I'm an executive coach, a career coach, a psychologist, and I've been practicing in Ann Arbor for over well, 45 years now. So it's been a while, and I figure out that sooner or later I'm going to move from practice to actually knowing what I'm doing. But yeah, that's supposed to be a joke, but I don't think anybody gets it. But anyway, we'll go from here. I wanted to introduce Thomas, and I was trying to think about a way to do this that would be uh, down to earth, but also informative. So I decided to introduce you, Thomas, to my dog. Well, actually, he's an imaginary dog because I don't have a dog at this point. But anyway, as if I had a dog. So I'm going to be talking to my dog Finn and about this guy Thomas. So here we go, and I'm going to read most of this because I wrote it out. Dear Finn, today I want to introduce you to a friend of mine who's such a cool guy. From a dog point of view, you wonder what breed. Well, he's part Bernese Mountain Dog, which is from his home area of Switzerland. And this dog is known for being very intelligent, loyal, faithful, dedicated, and affectionate. So I think you must have some Bernese in you, Finn, because those are traits you have. He's also got some lab in him and a husky as well. Like a good mix, he's got a lot of good things about him, and not just one thing. Whatever breed he may be, one of the things for sure is he's the leader of the pack. I think the Shangri-Las wrote a song about that. It's the one with zoom, zoom, zoom in it, and he's the leader of the pack. But I'm not going to play that today. Uh, yes, he's the leader, but he also chooses to lead really important things, things that have purpose. Like, for example, he's been working on how to lead a team to land a helicopter on Mars, and they've been successful. That's not an easy thing to do. Imagine for a dog, that would be like telling you nothing about where you're going, but sending you out to participate in the Iditarod. You'd have to get to Alaska by winter so that you could win the Iditarod race. That is a difficult task, and but that's the kind of thing that Thomas faces. Of course, Finn, if you ask Thomas about his achievements, the first thing he'll tell you that he doesn't do anything by himself. He needs his pack to work with him, and they need to be trustworthy and work together as a team on the mission. Um, you never did hear of one dog winning the Iditarod, did you? You'd never be bored around Thomas. He's forever starting things. When he was at the University of Michigan, which is where I met him, he started many things, including the Center for Entrepreneurship, which is still going on today and of which I'm proud to be a part. It's teaching hundreds of kids every year how to be a good entrepreneur. Some of them will probably be landing on the moon themselves one day. If I get a chance, I might consider going myself if you take somebody my age. With all that, Finn, you might imagine that Thomas is kind of a stuck up person, but you'd be so wrong. He's really down to earth. He cares about people, he loves his family, and he tries to support his wife and kids despite all the hours that he has to put in. I guess I already told you that his daughter will be coming to Ann Arbor in the fall. Let me tell you a little story about the kind of guy Thomas is. This past winter, with COVID and everything, I was taking my winter nap when he called me out of the blue. I saw his name popped up on the screen, and I figured it was something to do with business or coaching or whatever. But I was wrong. It was just being a good friend. He was just calling to check in, and he said he does this with a lot of his good friends. He likes to stay in touch. So, Finn, imagine not too many guys that I know do that. As a matter of fact, I could count on one hand the number of my friends who just called me out of the blue to check in. And you imagine that he did this while he was trying to manage getting to Mars and COVID was going on, which really hurt his mission. So Finn, find a nice place to sit near me while we hear Thomas tell his story. So Thomas, how do you do? How are you this morning?
I'm doing really well, Rob. Thanks so much. And Finn needs to meet Luna. It's my dog. So
Okay, all right.
yeah, that's right.
I won't even ask you how Luna got his name or her name.
Well, the way it happened actually is, of course, I needed to move my family from Ann Arbor, that we really loved as our home for our entire family life, to the DC area, and I tried to make everybody motivated. So the way to motivate my daughter Maria is I basically said, if you move to Virginia, you can get a dog. And I said, there's only one condition: you need to name it after something in the sky. And so it was a she, and then Maria named her Luna. So there.
That's great. Well, it's good they didn't. There was no meteor coming in that day, so that we they didn't name a meteor, but that might be cool too. Uh, so Thomas and I know each other pretty well. I provided some career coaching for Thomas when he was trying to decide what was going to be next in his career as he was winding up his work at the University of Michigan. And so we're going to make this kind of a chat, but we have some slides. Thomas has some slides. So let me start out. Thomas, your programs have been in the news for months now with landing on Mars with the aptly named Perseverance rover. And now with the history of making first flights in the Ingenuity Mars helicopter and also the first demonstration of oxygen out of the margin CO2 atmosphere. This Leaders Connect, I hope, is a behind the scenes look at the mission and the challenges you face as a leader. So why don't we just start out with you first telling us about Perseverance mission and how it's different from your previous missions?
Yeah, so I brought some visuals because some of the visuals are really stunning, and it won't do it justice here, but I'll make sure to send Rob some kind of things that you can do on your own time too. But Emily, if you don't mind pulling up the slides and go to slide 2, I just want to tell you, Perseverance is, formerly known as Mars 2020 because of the date of its launch when it was started, was a mission that is really part of the Mars exploration program, and it's looking at the 5 objectives that are here, right? The first one is that we know, of course, we have terrestrial planets. They have a similar history than our own Earth, and they really ended up looking different, right? One is like hell. That's Venus, right? It's it's so hot that lead melts on the surface. It has an atmosphere you can't even see out. It's what they call a runaway greenhouse effect, right? Then you have Mars, that looks kind of like a desert, right? And what's really interesting and what we have learned, and frankly, only in the last 20 years, that if we were looking at those 3 planets 3 billion years ago, they would look very similar. Very likely, all of them would have oceans and water standing on that surface. All of them would have an atmosphere that's reasonable, similar to the Earth. All of them, certainly Mars, but Venus, we're not sure, would have a magnetic field. So they look much more similar, but they went in different ways. So the first 2 questions here about the formation and early evolution and the history of climatological and climate processes are all about the different trajectories that these planets have taken. And of course, the most interesting question, which is the third one here, is, see, on Earth, if you look back through our geologic record, the first time single cell organisms showed up was during the time all of these 3 planets were roughly the same. And of course, we have in our mind, wow, did in fact Mars also kind of have an evolution of life on that surface during the time that on Earth this amazing miracle of life happened, right? frankly, what we're trying to learn in our planetary neighborhood is whether we can, whether it's hard or easy to develop life. And that's really what it's about. Besides that, of course, we believe we have a future on Mars as humans, and I really want to learn how that environment is there. The next slide, Emily, shows us kind of how this vehicle looks. So, I mean, I don't know, you see Emily, what she is doing. I'm going to show you a model here. If you're at work, you know, you get cool toys. You see, so first of all, it's a rower that's, you see the people back there. It's kind of like a small car. I will use that later, but it's like a small car that is in terms of size as a drivetrain that is very different than on Earth, because it wants to drive over rocks and so forth in a very stable fashion. And it has eyes that from the top there you see with the red cover. It's of course cameras that are there, and then an arm, which is very, very sophisticated. Its key purpose is to collect samples, and hopefully you see in my picture the samples that I'm holding up. This is a copy, it's a prototype copy of a sample device. Those samples will be collected after analyzing. Can you hear me okay, Rob?
Yeah.
After analyzing the environment, we're using these instruments, we'll collect the samples, and in the late 20s, we're going to take off with rockets to go pick up the samples. And that will be the first round trip to another planet ever of humanity. So this is, if you want the go part, the first half of the first round trip. That's the other piece we're doing, Rob. Back to you.
Yeah, I just wondered, Thomas, there's a rumor going around. I heard this from my granddaughter that actually this helicopter is made out of Legos. Is that correct?
The helicopter, which is at the bottom of that rover, and we dropped it off after we landed on Mars. That helicopter is not made out of Legos. Legos do not cost, 50+ million bucks. So otherwise, somebody got really rich from it. There's a lot of Ferraris somewhere in California if it's Legos.
Well, I think that if you make a Lego version of it, you could probably get your money back because the kids would eat it up.
Yeah, I think so too.
Harry Potter. Go ahead, Thomas. I know you've been a leader at the University of Michigan, and you've taken on a major leadership role. I wonder if you could talk to us about some of the challenges that you had, technical and people's challenges, and prior to COVID, because I know COVID was a whole other challenge. But if you could just talk about leadership, this program is Leaders Connect. So most everybody that is here wants to know how they can lead their team better. So what are some of the lessons that you have learned?
So I was really interesting. So I remember I came in, and I have to tell you, I was really scared about this mission, and I'll tell you why. Remember, I told you at the beginning, this mission was called Mars 2020. Well, here's the historic fact. For missions of that size, there had never been a mission that was launched in the year that it was designed to launch. And most of them were overcost by hundreds of millions of bucks, if not billions of dollars. And I went in with the desire not to do that, because, I'm a taxpayer, as you are, all of you. And I feel sometimes horrible things happen and we need to go fix them. But our normal approach should be that we stick to our commitments that we make to our stakeholders. That includes the taxpayer. So I went in and I actually found an interesting team. So I found that at the bottom of the team, there were amazing technologists. And at the top of the team, there were layers in the organization. And from the guy who's actually in charge of building this to the person, to me, there's something like 4 layers. And I realized, and it took me about 3 months, I realized that the information did not propagate in either way. So basically and for me, frankly, the most interesting question for me, was related to this helicopter we're going to talk about later, Rob. And that is, I had a meeting where they came to me and did a presentation, and they said, basically after the presentation, this helicopter is low risk. It's easy to do. And I don't know how to say that nicely, but I was pissed off because if you do something really, really hard and you tell yourself it's easy, you will not be successful. I mean, I learned that in entrepreneurship. I learned that in building space instruments. You need to know how hard things are. And if you lie to yourself, you will not be successful. Everybody who knows, who's actually works on it, knows it's really hard. And if the leaders say it's easy, you know the leaders don't have your back. So what I did in the first meeting, I kicked the helicopter off the rower. Basically said, you have to earn yourself off the rower by actually showing that you understand that this is hard, and by demonstrating to me and everybody that in fact you want to do this and you are equipped to do it. And so I kind of, and for me, that was just one of the examples, Rob, that really kind of showed me that we needed to build one team from kind of something that was kind of a bureaucratic mess. You know what I mean? It's like great, amazing engineers, great technical people, and a bureaucratic mess at the top. So that I thought was the biggest leadership thing. A leadership challenge. What I had to do, I ran 4 subsystems of the rover through termination reviews. So a termination review is one of the most embarrassing things that happen when you're a technical guy, because basically the top guy at NASA says, I don't trust that you can do this. At least I don't trust enough that I just accept it. I'm going to come check whether you can be successful. There had never been a mission where that occurred. And frankly, needless to say, focus and really transparent honesty and figuring out how we solve the problem together, building one team, is the leadership challenge that I found ahead of it.
That's really interesting. A lot of companies that I work with and that we know in Ann Arbor and all over had that same problem of top heavies. And the University of Michigan certainly is that way, where there's disconnect between the administration, which is huge, and the people who are actually developing the findings, the science, the social science findings that we hope would generate change in society. Let me ask you, Thomas, you talked about the leadership challenges with the people. What about challenges to land this on Mars, more of the technical? How did you handle the pressure of taking these risks, and how did you handle it personally, and also what were the challenges that you were facing on landing this rover on Mars?
So for me, that is kind of the big issue. So it's a hard, very, very hard mission to do, for starters. But landing on Mars, kind of statistically speaking, is a 50-50 thing, right? Kind of a order of magnitude. Kind of humanity's attempts, 50% were successful, the other 50% were not. Now I know that the ones that have been successful are my team, right? So I know I kind of have a leg up. But nonetheless, that is there. The reason it's so hard, I really felt it was absolutely important to build a single team. Now, I want to tell you, as part of that, what I really wanted to do is build that cohesiveness in the team. And frankly, what I started to do is something that nobody had ever done. I did basically with the leadership team a monthly all hands. And because I felt the broken team, and I basically felt we cannot trust each other until we were doing, and especially not during the landing. We need to trust each other blind, because I make a lot of decisions that they need to trust that I'm making the right decisions, and I need to listen to their feedback and basically fix the issues. So we started doing that, and frankly, this was kind of interesting at the beginning. Of course, everybody says that the guy is punishing me in DC. Until they realized, and this is the manager speaking now, I'm quoting, he basically said, the moment we started doing that, within a month or two, the decision speed of all of the systems went way up. And so did the trust. We started sharing, he says, all problems we had without ever being penalized. So, end of quote. Yeah. Rob, one of the if we do hard things like landing on Mars or starting a company or doing a major educational initiative that's truly life-changing, ultimately, right, you cannot do it on your own. And it takes real investment as a leader of time and effort to gain the trust. So at the end, even when you're not in the room, exact right thing happens, right? And so for me, landing on Mars, that's what happened. And frankly, to the grace of God, I would say, we basically built that team. And I have to tell you, the final meeting we did face to face was in early March, March 5th. That was the first time in the whole history of that Mars mission, except at the very beginning, where we were green on schedule. So in other words, by me investing money, by making fast decisions, we actually gained back schedule. So for the launch, the confidence was really high that we're going to make it. And that happened 2 weeks before COVID struck. Wow. I would say if we did not get ready for that, the whole COVID thing would not have worked. The team overall, if you looked at everybody who's working on that mission, it's about part-time, of course, most of them, 3,000 people that are working on it, 3, including, and that does not count something like 500 scientists and another something like 300 to 400 international partners that are also working. It also doesn't count all some of the industrial partners that the work that they're doing. So it's if you add all of it together, it's close to 5,000 people.
So in getting all those people together, you actually did that. You got them all together. Did you do that live or through Zoom or?
Sorry, I did the all hands only with the leadership team. So the only people that were in the room were the head decision makers. And so kind of the amount of people in the room were 20. By the way, I'm a strong believer in meeting. If you're in a room, there's a real purpose for you. Yeah. So for me, I don't like meetings that just, every once in a while you do all hands, especially once we landed successfully on Mars, I asked for all hands. I had thousands of people there, and I tell them about what their personal contribution and sacrifice meant to me. But I do not lead in all hands. That is, I need to trust the leaders. What I need to do is equip the leaders and then make sure that we have data that basically says that they can do a good job.
Thomas, if you want to step back just a little bit for all of us who are not scientists, and could you just give us a overall sense of the challenge? How does one get to Mars? How do you figure out? It's a big planet, but it's very small in the sky, and how do you go about figuring that out and actually getting there? What are some of the more technical challenges?
So why don't you show me, Emily? Show me a couple slides. Start with slide 7, if you don't mind. I want to show you a couple slides, and that's really important. Some of you work at the university, and I want to just tell you, this are a couple slides from launch day, which of course was in July. And by the way, those two leaders there, Joan and Danielle, they were both my students when I was at the University of Michigan. And both of them work in the program. Joan here on my, as you're looking at it on my left, with the Mars 2020 shirt with the red logo. She was an instrument lead of one of the instruments that was deeply in trouble. And Danielle is a full protection lead. They were in my program that I built ahead of the entrepreneurship programs. And I'm so proud of them. By the way, there's many more. But I actually saw on social media that they were in the neighborhood and they were going to watch from the beach. So I invited them and their entire family into the VVIP area, together with some of the political stakeholders and so forth. So I'm just really proud of them. Again, the point, the next slide, please, Emily, if you don't mind. The point, of course, that the first thing you need to do is you need to make a launch. And this is me, somebody taking a picture over my shoulder watching launch. I have to tell you, there was something 2 weeks before launch, Rob. There was a meeting I had. We had a leak on the second stage of that launch vehicle. And we had a meeting at 3 o'clock where we knew that if the leak was in a specific location that our engineers said it was, together with the United Launch Alliance engineers, we will launch. If it was not there, we're going to miss the launch and launch in 2 years.
Wow.
So basically, that's how close we got. And I have to tell you, my tears were in my eyes when I saw the launch vehicle go up. Now, when you launch, what you have to do is, of course, hit exactly what we're doing. We're not going into orbit around Mars. We're going straight in and go land. So to make that happen, everything needs to be exactly right, the location and the time. So we need to be slowing down a little bit or speeding up. Just as Mars rotates underneath it, we want to go to a specific destinations within a couple miles. So everything needs to work exactly. So flying that spacecraft was really important. And then, of course, comes the landing, which is what we're all nervous and nervous wrecks. I did not sleep basically the whole night before. The few hours I slept, I remember I used 3 T-shirts. Every time I woke up, I was sweated through. I told myself I'm not nervous, but my body said you're wrong. But so we were there in a room, perhaps you've seen it on TV. We were there in a room at that moment in time. I know, of course, every single risk that is there. I know that, for example, as we were flying towards Mars, we had 4 reboots of the entire flight computer. And I knew the likelihood, we have a redundant flight computer, but I knew the likelihood, of 1% during the last hour, we're going to have a reboot. So roughly 1%. So I know all of this and the worries of kind of switching over from one side to the other side. I know that's just one of the many examples. I know the wins that we cannot do. And I have to tell you, the next slide is a slide that happened and it has made history. So what you see now, let me tell you what happened before this picture was taken. So before this picture was taken, the spacecraft came in and it was hitting the Martian atmosphere. Even though it's only 1%, it's enough to heat up a heat shell to temperatures of over 1,000 degrees. It's glowing. And it's slowing down as it's feeling the friction of the atmosphere. So it's slowing down, it's supersonic still, when all of a sudden it's not slowing us down enough. So we dump the shell to the right. And what we are doing is we're putting up supersonic parachutes. By the way, when I came into NASA, we had real worries about these supersonic parachutes. In a test that we had run, they tore into shreds. So I have to tell you, for me, I'm sitting on the ground and I'm, of course, getting the data 15 minutes late because light is so slow from Mars, right? Kind of whatever happened is already there, right? That we're either on the ground or we've made a new crater. I don't know what happens, but I get the data. And I remember when the parachutes came out, the supersonic parachutes, they were slowing us down. And basically the supersonic parachutes, when I saw that they were slowing us down, it was just absolutely incredible, right? And then what happened? That's not good enough. The atmosphere is not thick enough. So what I need to do now is we need to cut the parachutes. And then what we have on top of this rower, we have a sky crane. I think, what's a sky crane? Well, think of a crane that's basically flying on boosters. You've seen it in sci-fi movies. So it's that, right? It's kind of it's a crane that's on boosters. And you see the rower, which is hanging from the bottom, is on these kind of straight lines. Do you see? So that's hanging from the bottom and it's basically flying. In addition to that, you see that the curly wire, that's where the data comes down, including the picture that the sky crane took that we are now looking at. So the sky crane takes this picture. Now, the one thing I haven't told you yet, we're landing in an environment, Jezero Crater it's called, that is 80% bad for landing. The reason I can do that is because we actually developed a new technology, which is terrain relative navigation, which is technology that is allowing us to actually look at the rocks and steer away from it. So the sky crane, together with its camera and its radar that measures the distance, is flying away from all obstacles. Where we were landing in an environment of 500 yards in all directions, 80% of the areas would have been bad. Oh. So basically, the sky crane, as we're flying down, it's making sure it's safe. And this is just a few yards over the surface. After it touches down, and then the sky crane flies away and crashes. So it flies away, it cuts the cables loose, it flies away and crashes. So that's what happens. The final time from the heat shield to the parachutes and then to the ground is 7 minutes, and we call it 7 minutes of terror, just because everything. Now, if you look at how many things need to work exactly for it to land, it's 95 single point failures. That any one of these, if it doesn't work, is mission failure. 95 of the things need to work. And of course, the way you get there is just like good engineering. You test, and then you test again. You improve, you test, and everything. But again, we cannot test for the sand. Do you see that dust at the bottom? That's the boosters pushing down air, and it's kicking up the dust. Frankly, we have a whole movie of that. I'll send it to you, Rob, so you can give it to the team later. We have a whole movie of that, because what we did is we actually put like GoPro, it's not GoPro, but GoPro-like cameras on both the sky crane, but also the rower. So we actually have, for the first time, full movies of that whole process. All the rest was theoretical.
My God, I'm sweating through 3 T-shirts myself just listening to you, Thomas. It's incredible. So it took so many things, and then take us to the next step. Then how this landed, and what happened next?
So what we did, of course, the first thing we tried to make sure is that the rower is healthy, and then what we did is, and Emily, if you show me the next slide, what we did is we created kind of a selfie that made history. Do you see what we did? Is we were hanging. You see the camera is moving. We have multiple. We have a camera on the arm, and we're looking back at over the shoulder of the rower. So you see that we're flipping and making a GIF out of it. So it's kind of, because that's cute. Many people think, I do. But equally importantly, what we had done is the first 30 days, kind of after making sure everything works. And I have to tell you, this is incredible. Everything works. I mean, it's basically, no damage on the way down and so forth. The first thing we do is 30 days of ingenuity. And of course, ingenuity is that little helicopter sitting over there. This is one of 5 technology demonstrations we have on this rover. What's really important to me is that we not just do the mission, but we open the door for the next mission. So basically, I already told you about terrain relative navigation. That is a technology that we've actually not only used as a demonstration, we dependent, our success dependent on it. And basically, what we're doing is we're taking these images and we dropped the helicopter there with the rower from the belly pan at the bottom, and then I drove away and took a picture, made sure it all works. And in the meantime, of course, you saw we've flown 3 times already. Let me just check whether there's anything I know. No, not yet. Probably in an hour or so, I'll know whether the 4th flight worked. The one previously the last night did not work. I can tell you why. It's absolutely clear. We knew that we have a 15% likelihood of a software hiccup, and we decided not to upload new software. We know how to fix it, not to upload new software, but we decided to basically come up with a hack. Of course, the next slide shows you, if you go to the next one, Emily.
Thomas, before we go there, I have to say that we have a comment about how amazing the resolution of these photos are.
Yeah, we're trying very hard to keep, you see the helicopters flying here. This is history's first flight. Actually, that's the 3rd flight, because it's going to take off. Did it right there, flying out of the picture. This is the rower taking that image from 60 yards away, flying out of the picture. Wait for it. Of course, it came back in. I could go to the next slide. I just want to see whether they put oh, there it is. There it comes back in, and then it's landing down. So this is literally pictures taken. Rob, when we started to work on the helicopter, many of our top engineers said it's crazy and it's impossible. This vehicle that's here is 2,500, more than 2,500 RPM. We saved every gram. This is only 4 pounds heavy, the whole thing. And basically has demonstrated now both up and down controlled flight and controls left and right in a way that really demonstrates the capability. There's multiple other demonstrations that he talked about, such as making oxygen on Mars for the first time. And we're really excited about this success. Again, this is a high risk, high impact thing, right? It was so exciting, not only to me, and Emily, if you don't mind, you can take the slide down. It's not only successful to me. I remember it was the first time where the president was so excited he called me. So you know, kind of, and had a chat about him and his grandson and the excitement he has, the son, overall, to do this. So again, that's what we did in the first 30 days. What we're now going to do, Rob, is to focus entirely on science. We already have in new science. We're going to tell you that we think that we're sitting in a floodplain that was covered. At times, this was a lake and a river that came down from the mountains that you just saw in the background. And we're sitting in a floodplain, and we actually see the signs of water on those rocks. And within the next 100 days, we're going to take the first samples in that plain. Of course, if we were looking at ancient signs of life, we would go to a similar type of floodplain and river deltas. That's where you see the ancient life on Earth. So we're going to start taking those samples, and of course, we want those samples in our labs in just a few years here on Earth.
Amazing. How do you power that helicopter?
It's electric, so it has solar cells at the top, and we're basically we're basically sitting it there. It's kind of funny. We can only fly at a certain time of the day, and the simple reason for it is we need to make sure the batteries are powered, and then we fly, and then we need to make sure that we dump the data onto the rover. Because of the fact that we have such low mass, we could not send the data directly to Earth. So we're sending it to the rover. There's an antenna on the rover that's paying attention and getting data, including the first image of the rover that the helicopter took that we posted 2 days ago. I do not have that in a presentation. We're actually now, really moving towards that science mission. This rover can go 3 times faster than any rover we've ever had on Mars. And the helicopter will operationally support it kind of as an operations demonstration to really see in future explorers whether we can use those kind of flying vehicles much more abundantly. So we're going to try that. This is a high risk thing. There's a non-zero chance that in one of these flights it will fail. I mean, we have not put as much testing into that as we did on the rover, just like you would expect us.
We have some questions, Thomas, and also, do you have a video that you want to show us, or should we go to the questions?
I think you should just go to the questions.
Okay. Lee, you had one. Lee Benjamin, are you out there? You want to post your question? You can ask Thomas directly.
Sure. Thanks, Rob. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Lee
Fantastic.
is an emergency medicine doctor at St. Joe's.
So I was interested in some of this new technology, and given the effort that needs to go into development and application, did you have to convince senior leadership to give you the go-ahead to try some of these new ideas, such as this helicopter? And if so, how did you influence their decisions to give you the go-ahead?
So yes. I have to sell those, right? I have to sell it to many different stakeholders. Generally speaking, I have a number of stakeholders. I have the science community itself. I have, of course, the White House, and I have, that sales process, it's every year, just like the budget process. Then I have congressional stakeholders from 2 parties that have at least 2 opinions, some of them sometimes more often. And that is my job, right? Precisely what you're talking about. Both selling and communicating to these stakeholders and keeping everybody aligned as we're developing this. What I did in this case on selling is really, I'm a strong believer that that space remains a place where we can demonstrate leadership and leadership not to the exclusion of partnership, but leadership, kind of a technological leadership away from any defense applications and so forth. And for us, kind of opening showing these demonstrated leadership things is really important. In addition to that, I made arguments that a number of these technology demonstrations were in fact pathways for human exploration of Mars or kind of next generation exploration objectives, and were in fact needed. And if you look at the cost of adding a technology demonstration to this rover as compared to a independent new technology development, it's a very much smaller cost. So what I try to do is kind of appeal to the broad objectives, right? Almost to the value system of the various stakeholders, but at the same time, bring performance to the table so people can trust that I'm not, that it's the tail on the dog. It's not starting to whack the dog. You know what I mean? Sticking with Rob's kind of initial introduction. We're really making sure that this technology demonstration is being focused on as a technology demonstration. I have done this basically across the board for most of the missions. Basically, my point to my team is I don't want to see a mission in which we're not doing something new. And the simple reason for that is leadership is much more about innovation than it is about doing the same thing over and over again, right? So it really is that attitude. And frankly, I went and talked about that strategy and that value from the beginning to every interview and every, with my meetings with congressional staff and, senators and congressional members. So that's how I do it.
And I want to encourage people to use the chat to ask Thomas more questions. I have one, Thomas, that I was in with my family in New York last week, and my daughter-in-law is a environmental scientist, and she's very concerned that our granddaughters are not going to have the life that we had because of environmental changes. And I just wonder about the technology that you're developing and how you see it possibly helping us on Earth to face the challenges that we are facing.
So, of course, I told you a story about Mars, and of course, what I didn't do is I told you that we run the world's biggest Earth science program that in my organization. And as part of that, what we're trying to do is take the very perseverance and ingenuity that we use, the names of our rover and the helicopter, use the very same values and the same teams to basically solve the issues that are here. I think that the way I would talk about it from the Earth science perspective, I want to talk later about technologies because that's an additional important part. And it also relates to what universities do for a living. And it's important also, but directly dealing with the Earth, right? Kind of because of the work that we're doing, our weather forecasts are better. Kind of this morning, when you looked at weather forecasts, close to 80% of that kind of information that actually added value to the weather forecast came from space assets that we built, and that's what we're doing. We also are creating. We recognize that the Earth is not behaving like we thought even 10 years ago. Sometimes you hear often people kind of saying like we knew this and that 50 years ago, and in some cases that's true, but we're learning a lot about greenhouse gases today that 5 years ago we did not know. And so for me, kind of actually understanding what's happening is really critical, and providing the data that improves and saves and improves lives on Earth is a second one. I do believe that fundamental research and technology development of the type that Mars Perseverance that I just showed you is doing is also important for the future of your grandchildren or whoever you're talking to. And that is that if you look at kind of the big industrial kind of booms that we had, kind of big moves, so often they're rooted in technology that, and fundamental research decades ago. And for us, it's really important that we invest in that, and we do so with the partnerships. Many of these activities that I just showed you, of course, I talked about it with a NASA logo on it, but you should know that we had 1,100 kind of overall commercial partners with different suppliers that are there. some of them really critical, whether it is, especially the helicopter system. A lot of this was a commercial partner that we worked on. And so for me, it's really critical that we continue doing that. So that's a little bit harder a pitch to make. But if you want to solve the problems 10 years from now, 20 years from now, the problems you don't know yet, you're going to go back to that toolbox of fundamental research and science and kind of engineering breakthroughs that are there that will help you solve those problems. And that's why we cannot neglect that. As a country, we need to solve the issues we have today, whether it's COVID, whether it's whatever it is. But we also need to kind of think beyond that time horizon. And I think that's what my program is really about.
I know you want to talk about the technologies. And Ferris, maybe you have a question for Thomas that might lead us into that?
Sure. Thank you, Rob. My question, Tom, by the way, thank you so much. What an insightful presentation. How much of this technology is available for commercializations, and how long does it take from the time you invent something to get it to be available for commercialization?
So we are actively involved in commercialization with all these technologies. We have technology transfer offices within NASA. I just want to point out that many of the technologies are already in the commercial sector, right? So we're using wherever we can commercial technologies. I'm really passionate about not competing against the private sector from NASA and quite doing the opposite. And you may have seen, Ferris, that as we're going to the moon, for example, what I've built is a program that instead of us building a lunar lander, which we know how to do, we can do that. There were, because of the Google Lunar X Prize and otherwise, there were up to 10 companies within the United States that says we know how to do it. So what I did, instead of building a lunar lander within NASA, I said, I'll take you by your word. And I know it's risky because I know the entrepreneurial ecosystem too. You're a seed state company. You're not a Series B company yet, but I'm going to bet on it. So I'm going to be your first customer. And I'm going to actually make you do this relatively cheaply so I can buy three of these early companies or 4, and I'm going to start flying to the moon. And I want to see whether you can do that. My full expectation, of course, is that some of them will be successful. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. But you should know that's a really high risk approach, right? Because from the point of view of the government, and frankly, that, somebody said, how do you convince people to do this, right? That was actually hard to sell because you have to go to Congress and basically say, I want you to buy into a program that fails 50% of the time. That's literally what I told them, exactly with those words, because I want to make sure they understand the risk. And I don't know, I don't hope, I go to the companies, they don't tell me they fail 50% of the time. But nonetheless, I want them to know that and buy in on that. And so basically by doing so, Ferris, what we're actually doing is we're supporting those companies the same way we're supporting SpaceX, right? For the reason there's commercial astronauts sitting on top of SpaceX rockets is our entire people have worked with SpaceX. SpaceX is an amazing company. But for us to be comfortable to put astronauts on there, our teams had to work. And many of the problems, there's a number of problems we solved for SpaceX. And no credit needed. That's what we're doing. I'm quoting Elon Musk when I say we would not be successful getting astronauts to the space station if it wasn't for NASA, end of quote, right? So for us, that's another way of commercialization. So yes, you can use the tech transfer version. My preferred version is actually in many cases that we find the key technologies in industry and we grow them there. So we don't actually have that kind of threshold to cross. So I try my best to be a first customer or kind of an investor in those industries, kind of through RNA funds or SBIR support and so forth, where they are. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I wanted to, this is absolutely fascinating and I've learned a tremendous amount, and I think everybody else is their brains are calculating what they have learned. I wonder if you could ask us a question, Thomas, and maybe a question that people could post on the chat, but what would you want to know from the leaders here? What question do you want them to think about?
So one of the things I've really, I mean, it's going to sound a little bit parochial, but I'm really interested, from a personal point of view. One of the things that worries me is that we have not had enough kind of footprint in the Midwest with NASA and with of course that's a historic artifact, right? I mean, there used to be a big footprint, because of the amazing boost of automotive that really took basically all brain power in and around the state of Michigan, right? Kind of a lot of these aerospace companies disappeared, and I'm really interested in your audience's thoughts. Like, if they were in my shoes, what are the opportunities that I may not see to really increase the footprint in the kind of Midwest, or if you want Michigan area? It's something that's on my mind a lot, because I think that's critical. So that's kind of a more parochial question. Of course, I have many leadership questions, including some that my friend Ernest is asking. Kind of learning from other leaders is what I try to do a lot, so I don't make the same mistakes over and over and over again. But I'll stick to this one, Rob.
All right. So why don't you ask the leadership question, and I'll give people a choice of what to answer.
Rob, it's Jan Garfinkel. I have a comment on that. Hi, Thomas.
Okay.
Hi, Thomas. It's Jan. How are you?
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Can I first, before I give my answer, I just want to really thank you for everything you have done, both at Michigan, at NASA, in particular in promoting women. I mean, I know that you helped a couple of my daughters when they were at Michigan, but also just seeing what you've done at NASA. When I watched the leadership that you've created for the Mars project, so many of them are women. It's seeing the young women that were in that picture. So anyway, keep up the good work. It's fantastic. And, I'm just really proud of what I've been able to see with what you've accomplished there. There is great work being done actually at Michigan Tech, Northern Michigan Tech up in Houghton. There's actually a spin out company that came out of there called Orbion, Orbion. It basically is for satellites that has a new way of doing the thrusters. Started by a wonderful young man, not really that young, mid-age probably, but his name's Brad Lyon. And he just has done a phenomenal job really trying to get Northern Michigan Tech on the map with aerospace. So I would encourage you, I'm not sure what's going on down here, but I know he has gotten a lot of play. He's actually raising, I think, his Series C, and a large step up, really making a big difference in the satellite area. So I know there is some energy being put in particular in Northern Michigan Tech.
Now, when you say Northern Michigan Tech, are you saying Northern Michigan or Michigan Tech?
Michigan, up in Houghton, Michigan.
Okay,
Tech.
Yeah, it's Michigan Tech. Yeah. I just
Googled Thomas
that.
was on the board of Northern Michigan for his stand in Michigan under Governor Snyder, I believe. So you want to comment on that, Thomas?
Well, I appreciate that. I just want to encourage you, Jen, and others. My email address is thomas.h.zurbuchen@nasa.gov. I really would value getting ideas like that. I mean, it's I wrote it down. I'm going to ask my tech people to look into it. And of course, thrusters for small spacecraft is some business we're in and we want more of. At this moment in time, Jen, when I started, we had something like 5, what we would think of as small spacecraft. And because of the whole launch industry going into a service model, we can actually afford doing smaller spacecraft that are higher risk. So if you look today, we have 65 small spacecraft that we're doing, some of them in constellations of 5 to 8, including one that's in orbit right now, built at the University of Michigan, called Cygnus, looking at water levels, using reflected GPS signals of water, so to say, and also measuring with these reflections wind speeds at the surface of water, right? If wind hits the surface, depending on how fast that wind is, that surface becomes shaped differently. So they can, from that shape, out of the reflection patterns, measure the speed. So So it's it's just a ingenious, just incredibly cool measurement. 8 spacecraft in orbits already for 3 years, and we just put it into extended mission. So this is 8 out of the 65.
So I'd like people just to take 2 minutes and maybe post something, much as Jan does, about what suggestions you have for this question from Thomas about how to bring more of NASA and this inquiry to the Midwest, specifically to Michigan. And Jan, thank you. Jan, you want to say what you do because you're right in the midst of all this stuff.
Well, not in the midst of this stuff, but I run a venture fund that's focused on healthcare and really trying to change healthcare by focusing on lowering the cost of healthcare, but still providing great innovation. So we invest in companies across the United States, well, really international also, but roughly, I would say 1/3 of our investments are in Michigan, half of them are in the Midwest, and then the other half are coastal and outside of the US. But we're on our 5th fund, and we've invested in over close to 60 companies now through almost 20 years of investing.
Rob, I had Jen was one of my close friends and collaborators during my time in the entrepreneurship program. She was very encouraging. I remember still vividly when she gave a seminar and she talked about how she worked on this company and her twins on her laps as she was trying to answer phone calls that related to this. Always thought about, and she said, I hope I'm not grossing. I think you may have talked about feeding them too. I was like, I hope I'm not grossing out the male students. That's what you said. Do you remember that talk?
I do. It's a common, yeah. It's hard being a woman and a mom and trying to work at the same time, but we juggle a lot of balls, and that's why I made my comment to you about being so, strong in your belief that women can really contribute to the workforce and in very strong leadership roles. And it takes people like you and other, men and women helping each other to realize that it takes everybody to be successful in this world. It's not just one type of person that will ultimately make a certain product successful. It takes a lot of disparate thoughts, and it's really important to be a leader in that and make sure all those voices are heard and those people are promoted and rewarded appropriately.
I just want to quickly talk about that, Jen, and I want to tell you, first of all, I feel really passionately about this. I'm a first gen. I nobody expected that I would go to have a college degree, and I feel that actually that gave me some powers that others don't have. Like I'm a kind of a scrappy guy, right? And then because I had to fight out of a hole, I'm kind of okay taking risks more than where others aren't, because I already overcame all this. Like I look back, I see a big mountain. I'm halfway up, right? I'm not where I want to be, but I already did all this, so why wouldn't I take the next step, right? But I've also learned is that I thought people were so wrong in misjudging me, right? Or ignoring me, right? Because I basically felt that, if there's anything, I do think I can add value to a team. And if we're in the business of building the best teams in the world, which is what we're doing, if we're in a business and building the best teams, what I'm telling you is really, really hard to do. We need to build the best teams. It is not acceptable to just leave talent at the door, and especially leave talent at the door also in a leadership perspective. Frankly, the leadership team are really much weaker if there's no diversity. Frankly, when I joined NASA, my biggest challenge, and I think I said it before, you may have heard me, is I was in many decisions where no discussions happened. I call that groupthink. And that's like, why are you guys not seeing the problem? You're snapping the solutions, and it's because there was no thought diversity in the room, and then often that relates to diversity overall. And for me, just because we have such a big, that the landing on Mars, that the content that I'm talking about was watched by 2.5 billion times. So we are the front window of U.S. innovation in so many of the cases. We want to showcase the United States, and it's not just people who look like me. And for me, I've never hired a second best person, and in any search because of that argument. But I've actively engaged, communities to actually get candidates into searches where otherwise they weren't there. Where I am today, 3 out of 4 division directors are female. My deputy out of 4 deputies, 2 of them are female. And you look at some of these leadership teams, managers, they're female, including the person who runs all the operations on Mars right now. She's an amazing leader, basically a first gen out of the state of Ohio, right? A farm girl, as she calls herself, right? So for me, I mean, a kindred spirit. For me, I get, we get that. And for me, it's not about taking emphasis away from the ones who are already here. It's to add. It's to add to that. And the question just really is, do we want to be building great teams or not? And if the answer is yes, you need to solve that problem. And address the issues that are there. And if that means that we need flexible work environments, let's do it. I mean, for me, that I want success,
Thomas,
and we will achieve success.
You might know, you probably do from reading the paper, that the top 3 political leaders in the state are women. The governor, the Secretary of State, and the Attorney General. So this is a first for our state at all these levels to have a leadership team like that. It's interesting because it's also created some problems for us. The state was the target of many of the militia. They didn't like this idea of Michigan, I think, having women leaders. I think you've read about the plot to assassinate the governor, and actually they're now blowing up. They talk about blowing up a bridge so that the governor couldn't chase the people who had kidnapped. So it's a challenge, and there's a lot of people who are very negative. I want to get back to your question, Thomas, about the state, and there's a couple people on board. First of all, I want to point out Chuck Newman. Chuck, are you there? Yeah, there he is. And Chuck's going to have a program featuring you once again on Sunday, where you're talking more about the personal side of your journey from a mountain in Switzerland to Bern to University of Michigan. So, Chuck, how can people get invited to that? You want to post that on the chat? Chuck is one of our leading entrepreneurs. And Chuck has done a lot about recycling over the years. I think he comes out of a background where his father or grandfather or whatever had a junkyard, and he's developed that into a high-tech recycle. So if you want to get rid of the junk you're leaving on Mars, Chuck may figure out a way to do that. That stuff that landed, unless you've already figured that out. Another person that I know knows you well is Mike Cole. Mike, you want to say hi and talk about what you're trying to do through your program at the Bank of Ann Arbor?
Thomas, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Good to see you.
Yeah.
With beard, I noticed.
Yes, it's my COVID beard. Absolutely. Good to see you. Yeah, we're still continuing to move on, working with these tech companies all around southeastern Michigan. And I also wanted to give a shout out. I saw Mel Drum in the chat room there. The Ann Arbor Hands-On Museum has a new exhibit. They're launching a Challenger Center exhibit. So, so kids and people can come in and experience like they're in a NASA space launch situation. So that's very exciting. But it's great to see you. This was a great talk today. Really, really fun to see you.
Thomas, I know you have to wrap up. You got a really busy schedule. I just wonder if you could leave us with some your leadership lessons. I mean, you've been a leader at various institutions, and you've thought deeply about it. So if you had to say, what are your top leadership lessons for the group? And we'll end with that.
So first of all, I want to just thank everybody for spending some time with us here. And, I noticed that friends of mine and, acquaintances of mine who called in from all over. My friend Ernest is a skier who skis with me from time to time. Every ski lift, we talk about another topic. That's our goal. Like totally different topic from the different ski lifts. So thanks to everybody. Look, I'm a learner, and leadership is one of the things that have been interesting to me all along. Many of the questions that people have asked me, I would like to ask other leaders. But if you ask me, what are the things that I've most learned, kind of things in the last 5 years in this NASA job? I would basically say, be aware of who you are and also what your strengths and weaknesses are, right? So you think, well, that's a trivial thing. Well, if you're in a big complex organization, and especially if you're in a position with a big checkbook, remember kind of our program is $7.3 billion that I'm responsible for every year. So you need to know who you are and stay rooted to the ground, because there are a lot of people who, one of my mentors, and mentors are really important to me, told me is like, do not believe people when they come tell you you gave the best talk. You probably haven't. Your jokes are not any more funny now than they were before. So be aware of who you are and be yourself. I think the second thing is, and we already talked about this, focus on the team and understand it. You need to understand, and for me, what's really important, frankly, I spend time, my top managers of the project, I know each one of them personally. I take them to dinner. I just did, in the last 2 weeks, I took 4 of my managers to dinner and I listen to them. It's not about work. I want to know who they are, how they're doing, and so forth, because they have a lot of pressure. They need to know that I have their back. And if something comes through the channel that just makes no sense, they get to know me, my values. If something comes down, they come ask me about it. They don't go implement it. Get to know your team, understand it. And the final one is really make decisions. See, it's really funny, and especially, as a university guy, and I just want to tell you, I have fond memories of the University of Michigan. It gave me much of who I am today and so forth. But one of the things I just want to kind of be a little bit critical of this, making decisions is really important if you want to be, quote, leaders and best. And if delaying decisions and putting yet another committee in place to address a given question has opportunity cost. There is opportunity cost to waiting. Don't just think of the cost of a bad decision. Think of the cost of waiting too long. And those are kind of the 3 things that I really learned a lot about. Again, about myself, who I am, also kind of building the teams that way, but then focus on the teams, understand them, and actually be a person with that team, and then make decisions, because waiting can really have opportunity cost. Think of that too, even though it hits you in the head less than the pain of making a mistake. The pain of waiting is just as bad.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Thomas. We've all enjoyed this. Finn has been fascinated. He hasn't moved once, but I think he's sleeping, so don't worry about it. And I hope, the best wishes ahead. We wish you for the best. We know you've got great things in your future. You're a wonderful leader. Unfortunately, you're Swiss, so you can't be our president, but, something close to that anyway. So we're going to wrap up. I want people to share their insights from Thomas. I write a Monday newsletter, Dr. Rob's Leadership Tips, and I'm going to include Thomas's video, some of his comments, but I also want to include some of yours. And I look forward to listening to Chuck Newman's interview with you on Sunday. So I'm going to say farewell and enjoy, and we look forward to your next conversations and your next achievements.
Really, thanks again, and thanks to everybody. I'm going to read comments now. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
We'll sign off today for everybody else, and we'll be back. Next, I'd like to do a leadership group like this on leading a nonprofit. And when you think about nonprofits, I'm not talking just about service agencies, but if you think about it, Thomas is a nonprofit. University of Michigan is a nonprofit. Sometimes you may not know that. Government is a nonprofit. So we want to bring together leaders like Gretchen, other people who are on the line, Katrina, Brittany, and talk about what does it take to lead a nonprofit. We don't want just people from nonprofits to participate, because I want to encourage leadership between the 2 segments. So we'll see you in May. And meanwhile, enjoy the spring. Talk to you all soon.